Hello, this is Paola Guthrie from Creating Purpose with Pao, and I welcome you all to the Spanglish World Network and Heart Network on Single TV channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores. While you download the app, please make sure that you rate it and you leave a comment because feedback is important to us. The app is totally free, and you can find Zingo TV on Google Chromecast, on Amazon Fire TV sticks, on Roku sticks, and also in all smart TVs from 2016 forward. Thank you all for being here today because we have a special guest and she is going to share lots of value. She is a personal coach who supports women to turn off their inner critic and empowers their inner cheerleader. And her name is Jodi Rae Solomon. And I say, welcome to the house. Thank you for being here, Jodi.
Oh, thank you so much, Paola. This is really exciting to be here and share with you today.
Yay. So please share a little bit about you so we get to know you more.
Well, have you actually ever thought, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because typically that's a question that we ask as a kid or a teenager who is looking to decide on their career path. And for some people, that question starts to come up again in the middle of some life transition. And suddenly you might look around and discover that you're unhappy with your situation. And so years ago, that was me. I was in the middle of a major life crisis. I lost both my parents 10 months apart. And in between their deaths, I almost died of a pulmonary embolism. And in case you don't know what that is, it's a blood clot in the lungs. And if that blood clot gets caught in the passageway of the lungs when it enters, you could instantly die. And so I was really lucky. And I remember standing at my mother's funeral, and I had to choose between breathing or crying because I literally couldn't do both. I couldn't breathe if I tried to cry. And so naturally, during this time, while I was healing my lungs, healing my body, and even healing my soul, I realized that life was way too short to spend time being unhappy.
Wow. So, do you think it's through life crisis that were you able to analyze your life there?
Absolutely. You know, it brought up a lot of fear for me at the time. And, Tony Robbins talks about we have two deepest fears. And our two deepest fears are number one, I won't be enough. And number two, that I won't be loved. And for me, during that time, it brought up a lot of those fears of who am I? Who am I outside of my parents being passed away? What do I want to do with my life? Because I looked around and realized I didn't like my life at all. And so when people are looking around and asking themselves those two questions of am I enough or will I be loved? It's helpful, I found, to ask what is feeding that fear? And sometimes it could be both fears at the same time. And I remember feeling like I was judging myself as much as others were judging me.
Wow. So is what led you to say I'm going to be happy, and what led you like? I mean, I know this Christ life situation helped you analyze to see that you weren't as happy as you wanted to be.
Mhm.
So, what was the fuel that took you to take action?
So when I was, there in this place where I was healing my lungs and I was healing my body and even healing my soul, I started to examine, like, why am I unhappy? And I really discovered that I had those two deepest fears. I felt like I didn't feel loved. I felt like I wasn't good enough. And then one day, my husband made an observation to me. And this was really, it blew my mind because he said, every time I suggest to you that you try something new, you're full of negative energy. You have excuses of why you won't succeed at that suggestion. And I thought, wow, wow, is that how people see me? And I was completely shocked. And I knew that he was speaking the truth. I was the one person that was standing between me and all of my dreams because I was listening to my inner critic.
Now that you mentioned the inner critic, have you heard this story? I live in Oklahoma at a Cherokee Landing. How can I tell? I mean, how can I tell you? There's a lot of Indian tribes around Oklahoma.
Okay.
So they say there is a Cherokee story that talks about the inner critic. I mean, to me, it's like that's what I think. Whenever you mention inner critic, is like they say within us there is two types of wolves. There is the a nice one. There is the cheerleader, that's going to help you to move forward, and there is the inner critic that's going to stop you. And it says like the one you feed the most is the one that wins. So I mean, I don't know if you were familiar with the story.
Yes, I've absolutely heard that story.
Okay, okay.
There's two wolves, and which one do you feed? Do you feed the bad wolf? Do you feed the good wolf? And that what you pay attention to really is what you get. Um, you know, Paola, there is a voice inside of your head chatting all day long. Did you know that?
Yes, yes. It's our inner, it could be our psychology. Some people call her our inner voice. And now it's like, oh, it's clicking as an inner critic. Or,
So when I learned to observe this voice, um, I was walking up the stairs. And I encourage anybody who's listening that the next time you walk up a staircase, listen to what your mind is saying. And I bet that mind chattering away is going to say right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. And honestly, it doesn't matter what the conversation is in your mind, whether it's positive, it's neutral, or it's negative. That conversation in your mind is going to constantly be live streaming in your head. However, many people tend to focus on that negative conversation. And that's where that inner critic comes in. That we're always doubting who we are because we're feeding the fear that we're not enough and that we won't be loved. That inner critic actually was born when you were a child. Believe it or not, the inner critic was there to help you as a child to excel at life, to learn to navigate life through the adult world so that you could be found worthy or be found good enough. And if you are found to be enough, you are also often found to be loved. So that inner critic or that inner voice was ultimately there to help you become your best self.
I
But that's
love
where
that.
the problem comes in. Yeah. Because as we get older, Paola, that inner critic keeps beating us up and it expects us to do better because that's what it did when we were a kid. If it told us what we needed to do better, we went and did it better. But as an adult, the more it tells us what we need to do better, the more we actually feel like we're being beat down and our self-esteem starts to drop because that inner critic just won't let us be happy for a minute.
Do you think it has to do with as we become adults, we're not as celebrated as we used to when we were achieving, like certain stages in our life, and our parents were there or our family was there to cheer us on, even teachers. Uh, so they kind of helped us in a way, guide us. But
Absolutely.
whenever,
So think about when you were back in school, and we in school would go and take a test. And when we would get that test back, And let's say we had a big red pen on it that said 98. Instead of going, yes, I got 98 right, and go and look at which 98 you got right, instead, as a child, we were taught if I go look at the two I got wrong, I can do better next time. So we were hardwired as children to look at what we're doing wrong to achieve more. And that strategy simply doesn't work as an adult because it doesn't allow us to celebrate the 98 we did right. It only allows us to focus on the two that we got wrong.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that example. Because, yes, I mean, I remember or getting an 80 and you're like, oh, I wanted a 90. And then you focus on what you didn't get instead of celebrating that you got a B or you got an 80.
Exactly.
So it's the programming that we're getting as we're getting older. And then we get an adult age and we feel lost, right?
Exactly.
Yes, that's beautiful. So now, based on your experience with working with women,
Mhm.
what does fear of rejection looks like to them?
So, fear of rejection is really, it goes back to those two doubts that, those two deepest fears. Will I be enough? Will I be loved? And we're constantly focusing on those. And ultimately, it comes back down to if I feel that you are rejecting me, it is because somewhere on the inside, I'm rejecting myself.
That's awesome. It all goes back to our psychology.
Exactly.
And and whenever people begin to see, the ones they begin to change that psychology that they have about themselves,
Hmm.
then things will begin to change and they'll begin to see a brighter future ahead of them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I totally get it because it's like sometimes is our ego, is our trauma, it's our rules, the we develop through our life. It's our limiting beliefs, our blind spots,
Hmm.
the we carry. So we have to learn to analyze how are we handling, because I remember like I used to have more rules. Let's just say an example in a marriage, well, if he doesn't do this and that, then I will not do this and that, and I'll show him. But those were my rules,
Yeah.
and I was stopping that love
Hmm.
from showing up, because I had those rules. But if he doesn't do this, then I'm not going to do that. So that's where that's just a simple example. Or same thing with our children. If they don't do this, then I'll make sure that they get the lesson. And in reality, I was hurting my marriage because I
Hmm.
had those rules.
Yes.
And I was hurting that relationship with my children
Hmm.
because I had those rules. So I had to learn to see, that those rules weren't serving me because I wasn't truly loving them. So we have a lot of work to do because we also have blind spots that we don't see. But through my coaches, I've been able to figure them out. And that's what you do.
Beauty of coaches that they allow you to see the blind spots. It's almost like driving a car. And if you think about driving a car, and we have mirrors on each side, right? But as another car comes up alongside us, there's this moment where you can't see them in the mirror anymore unless you turn your head and then you're like, oh, wait, there was a car there, right? But they're not in the mirror. And that's what a coach does. The coach holds up an extra mirror so that you don't have to turn your head, so that you can still look at what your goals are and say, oh, I didn't see that.
Huh, that's beautiful. Uh, how do you see self criticism affecting our personal growth?
Wow. Um, so if you're always in this place where you're thinking, I'm not good enough, then you're going to get the I'm not good enoughs. So when we're criticizing ourselves, it's keeping us in this stuck state because we believe, or at least I believe, that that stuff on the other side that I want is no longer possible. It cuts off possibility when we criticize ourselves, and it keeps us stuck.
Where do you think the inner critic plays a role?
The inner critic really comes in because that's what is keeping us stuck. That voice in our head. That voice in our head that is constantly chattering away when we're walking up the stairs is also telling us in the background how it feels about us, what we think. And the problem comes in that oftentimes we have unobserved thoughts. So if you're feeling some type of an emotion coming up and you don't, I feel blue today, I don't know why, it's more than likely because you have an unobserved thought, because your mind is actually thinking at 10,000 words a minute and you're only able to speak 600 a minute.
Yes. Awareness,
Yes.
for everybody that is up there, is like the awareness of like paying attention what the inner critic is telling you, paying attention what are those thoughts that you are registering, like so that you have control of saying, I don't like that, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, it's been like one of the greatest gifts, is like being able to be aware of what triggered me, like wondering, is like, well, why did I feel that way, what triggered me?
Yeah.
And it goes back, it could go back to an unlimiting belief that you might think, like Jodi's saying, that you're not good enough, or that, you're not fast enough, and that's why that happened. And those are old traumas as well, right, Jodi? I don't know if you had any old traumas from your childhood, of your adulthood, uh, that you are still dealing with, or you dealt with, a couple of months ago.
I've had a fair amount of traumas, I think, like everybody else. And it comes back down to the story that I was telling myself about what that trauma meant, what that experience meant for me in my experience. You know, and oftentimes my inner voice, my inner critic would, say, oh, well, Billy made fun of you at school for, your glasses. It must mean there's something wrong with you because you wear glasses. And when we start to repeat that in our head over and over, it becomes a story. And that story becomes our identity. And that identity changes our relationship to how we show up in the world.
That's beautiful. Yes. Let's create that awareness to pay attention what story we're telling ourselves about ourselves. That's
Yes.
great. Because sometimes that's where we find our answers.
Hmm.
That's where we find our answers. Now that you said that, I just had an aha moment this last weekend, because I'm from Mexico, and there, like the Spaniards conquer, Mexico. So you're gonna find blonde people, and you're also gonna find a lot of dark people like me, because there's also the Aztecs, the Mayas that were there. So my great grandpa was from Spain, and he married my great grandma, which was Maya. And when I was about 10, somebody said in the family, if we would hide you and like three more in the family, the whole family would be white with pride. So I registered that my color wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So, through that time, I'm just now like, oh, wow, I am enough, no matter what color I am. But there was something in there. And then my youngest daughter looks just like me. And I'm like, wow, like God gave me a daughter to fall in love with myself again, and to teach her to love herself no matter what color she is.
And isn't it amazing how those stories that we come up with, they start in childhood?
Yes. And I used to love, like, blonde babies. Like it was like, oh my goodness, I love blonde babies. Oh well, my husband's blonde. You know what I mean? It's like somehow my psychology seek out for a blonde person, but none of our babies are blonde. They look more like me. You know?
But because you as a child had formed this belief that your coloring was wrong, and that if you had the coloring of blonde was good, you found yourself attracted as an adult to people with the coloring that your subconscious called good.
Yes, yes. And it was funny because it's like I looked at her, you know, it was this weekend that I had the aha moment. And I looked at her and I'm like, oh wow, you know, like life is giving me the opportunity to see, you know, to fall in love with myself through my daughter and then teach her. So I share this story so that our audience out there are aware, you know, that sometimes the stories, that traumas, that situation that happened years ago are still telling us that something in us is not good enough. So that's where we feel the rejection, or we feel like we're not loved enough, or you know, it brings self-doubt as well for us to continue to move forward. So anyways, continue to let's move to self-doubt now. How would you coach someone that is dealing with self-doubt?
So self doubt goes right back to which voice are you listening to? Are you listening to the voice that's telling you things that are good and positive? Are you listening to the voice inside you that's telling you things that are negative? And oftentimes, self doubt is really tied to that negative voice. So, a lot of times I will ask my clients, tell me a little bit about that voice. And we will take a deep dive into where did that voice start, whose voice was it mommy or daddy's, what were the events around the formation of that voice. And then I'll explain to my clients that, if you have a dog and you get a dog, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're probably going to name the dog. So let's name the voice in our head, this negative voice, the inner critic. And so some of my clients will name it things like Karen, Bitchy Betty, Stubborn Sally. And my personal favorite is P3, which is Polly Pissy Pants. And this way we can refer to that inner critic by name. The second thing I'm going to ask my clients to do is really picture a person sitting next to them with that name. So if it's P3, P3 is sitting on the couch next to you. And P3 is saying all of that negative inner chatter. You're not good enough. You didn't do this. You're so stupid. Why you always fail, whatever, right?
Yes, you're not far ahead like you should.
How long do you think you're going to put up with that negative persona sitting on the couch next to you in your home while you serve it a glass of iced tea? Probably not long before you are escorting that person to the door, right? So that's when we give that negative voice a name and a persona, and we see it outside of ourself. It allows us to separate the emotion of it and see the reality that it's just a voice, and we get to choose when it's time to escort that voice to the door.
And tell them goodbye.
Exactly. But I don't always encourage my clients to say goodbye, because the thing about that voice is it's going to be with you the rest of your life, whether you want it to be or not. So the third thing that I encourage my clients to do is start to make friends, or at least peace with the voice. So you get to choose when it's time to listen to the voice and when it's time to ask the voice to take a step back, because the voice is always going to be there. And if you don't allow your inner critic to feel like it's seen and heard, it's going to scream at you a little louder each time.
Something came to me just now that you said that. Would it be that our inner critic is trying to keep us safe? because that's the job of our brain to keep us safe.
Exactly.
So
It goes back to what I said earlier, that inner critic was born as a child. And as a child, that voice came into our head to help us navigate the adult world so that we could be found worthy and we could be found loved. And so it's there to help us get all the things that we want. It's designed for a purpose and a reason. It's up to us when to use which tool in our tool belt. And that's all the inner critic is a tool.
that is awesome for anybody that is listening out there. Your inner critic is trying to keep you safe. But you're like, here we go. I love your soul amazing uh, coach. That then it is your soul that has to dominate and say, hey, thank you for telling me that I might fail. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I am wiser now. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to go after that. Got it. Oh, okay. Yes. That's amazing. That is amazing. And there is, there has to be awareness, there has to be awareness about the inner critic, because it can keep us from truly skating, from trying a marathon. It can, and that's growth, like every time we go out there and we learn a new skill, that's growth. And whenever we overcome fear, it's like there's growth, and you're like, oh yes, I did it, I was able to do it.
Yeah.
So yes, 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 I'm like, I'm getting aha moments where it's like just thinking about it, where it's like it's the one that's trying to keep us safe. It doesn't mean that it's mean. It's just trying to keep you from being hurt, from being like you, from feeling that you're not good enough if you try and you fail.
Exactly.
It's trying to keep you safe from people to say, well, I don't love you enough because you didn't finish college, or I don't love you enough because you didn't follow through this. So, okay, I'm getting it. Yay. I see. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful work. It is beautiful work because we all have that inner critic.
Yes, we all have it, whether we recognize it or not, and whether we're aware enough to become an observer of the voice or not, it's going to be
Observer.
there.
Yes. So let's develop those awareness and become an observer to our thoughts and our feelings, and how this inner critic plays in our life. So yes, beautiful. Uh, so I believe there is goodness in every human being. It's like we're all born with goodness. The majority of us, I truly believe that there is good in humanity. But there is time we don't feel adequate
Mhm.
to express our authenticity. What are your thoughts and advice on this subject for women out there that don't feel like they can be authentic, like bring their gifts to the world, because they might be, the inner critic might tell them you'll be rejected, don't do it, it's a waste of time.
So, how can you express what you truly don't know? And I ask that question because there are so many people out there who do not know themselves. They know who the world told them to be. They live a life that they're expected to live. They tell themselves that what they really want to pursue in life is just hogwash, that it won't make money, or people will um, not accept them if they try that thing. They have this expectation placed by mommy and daddy or their peer group on who they need to be who they need to be and show up as, so that they will be loved and accepted. And so we walk around being who the world expects us to be. However, to be truly authentic, you have to know who you are at the core of your soul. And you have to know the things that light you up, the things that excite your soul. Though the difference between what somebody else wants you to be and what you want to be. And when you start to figure those things out for yourself, authenticity starts because you are starting to walk a walk that matches your talk. And there becomes a congruency between your words and your actions. So, for instance, if I say I like pink, you're going to see that there's a congruency here because you see a fair amount of pink in my background. But if I were to tell you, oh no, I really like green, you're going to question that authenticity of that statement because you don't see much green in my background. So when we get congruent between our words and our actions and we get to know ourselves, what we want on the inside, and we're no longer living that life that others expect us to live, well, that's when we start to empower our inner cheerleader. And empowering your inner cheerleader really only means that you are celebrating yourself for being you, 100% authentically you, and you are loving it.
That's beautiful. So it's not as easy then to be authentic because you have to know who you truly are.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
not. Authenticity is such a tossed around word these days. It's almost overused. Oh, you have to be an authentic person. But the reality of authenticity is getting to know you on a deep core level.
Awesome. Yeah. Feed that inner cheerleader, like you said, that we have in us so
Yes,
that we can continue to show up congruently. So, yes, I think we need a lot of that here in this world. Yes. And as women, our limbic system, which says our emotional part of the brain, is so much bigger than a male brain that we have the gift to truly be authentic because we are able to forgive more than a male brain. We're able to have more compassion. I mean, express a variety of emotions. But in a good way is like we are the ones that could be the glue uh, in the family. So whenever we show our authenticity in our gifts, I mean, we're giving our children and those around us uh, the beauty that is within us.
absolutely. And male brains have, slightly fewer of those connections than female brains, but females are more conditioned towards being authentic, being in touch with their intuition, being in touch with the core of who they are.
Yes. Let's take advantage of that. Yes, yes. It's like, and it is a work. It is work because sometimes it depends what's going on in your life. Sometimes the inner critic might be really heavy
Yeah,
that day, but you have to be aware and say no. That's what there are strategies and techniques that allow you to say, "Excuse me, but not today."
exactly.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about gratitude. Because I think there are so many benefits of being grateful and practicing gratitude and to learn to practice gratitude in our everyday life. So, what are the benefits that you've seen practicing gratitude?
Well, gratitude to me is one of the most interesting things. And I'll be honest, it was the gateway for me to really understand the connection between my thoughts and my feelings. So, Paola, I'm going to ask you to play along with me for a moment. Would you mind?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, I want you to take a moment and be grateful. I love that smile on your face. So, in order for you to be grateful, what did you do?
I thought of my children and my family. I thought
Mm.
of you being here today.
So, one of the most consistent things you just told me was that you thought of something in order for you to feel gratitude. And that is for me the gateway to understanding everything. That anything that I feel starts with a thought. If I want to feel gratitude, I simply have to think about something I'm grateful for. And I started to realize, oh, if I can control that, I wonder what else I could control. Because I'll be honest with you, Paola, when I started to come to this work, I was one of those people who, if you were to say, uh, feel gratitude about three things, I would struggle to figure out what am I grateful for? Because I had spent so much of my life hardwired into that negative voice. So all of my memories were around negative things. This person hurt me, that didn't go right, I suck as a human, whatever it was. So to come up with those moments of gratitude was really challenging. But it was similar to going to the gym. The more I practiced it, the more I tried. Sometimes I did a crappy job at it, but I still tried. And other times I did a great job at it and I still tried. And the more I practiced it, the better I got over time. And so then I started to realize for myself, if I can control the feeling of gratitude just by thinking, what else could I control in my life? Which is really how I stumbled upon this whole idea of, you know, our inner critic. And if I could become observant of that voice, use it as a tool for when I wanted to, level up, or when I wanted it to step back so that I could celebrate and empower my inner cheerleader, I was able to do so because I thought a different thought. So, in the end, gratitude is the gateway to learning all the other skills of understanding that thoughts control feelings.
That is beautiful. Yes, yes. If we can be, create that awareness that is like every time you think of something beautiful, then you create that feeling just by the thought. It's like if you think, and we know we're clever enough to know exactly where to go to feel, to create that gratitude or begin to practice that gratitude. And whenever we also feel grateful, then we can continue to look to like celebrate, like, oh wow, it's like I'm so grateful I was able to accomplish this goal. And then bring the celebration so that you can teach your brain to do more of it. That's another thing that we don't do a lot, right? That's one of the things that I'm still working on it. It's like I don't celebrate every small step that I feel like I accomplished something that I should, but I'm in the process as well.
Isn't it fascinating how, as a human race, we're addicted to feel good feelings? However, we also tend to pursue those feel good feelings from outside sources, whether it be
Yes.
drugs, other people, whatever we participate
Alcohol,
in.
it numbs you.
But what if all we needed to access those feel good feelings was our thoughts? Wouldn't that be like the best way to break all of those outside addictions so that we become addicted to our inside goodness?
Yes, like we don't need, people do not need drugs, do not need alcohol. They do not need gossiping to feel better. They don't need all unhelpful resources that are out there that we think we need them in order for us to stop the pain, in order for us to to feel better with a substance. It's like we, and it is in some behaviors, like I said, the gossiping does not take you anywhere. Drama might feed you, those emotions might make you feel like you're matter, that you're important because you're right and they're wrong, but in reality is not helping you to grow. So that is awesome that you bring in this awareness. Yes, it could be, if we learn to choose our thoughts, you can create a beautiful change in your life and the life of others. Because if we feel good, our kids and our family and co-workers will feel amazing. And Jodi and I are very familiar with the phrase that is a poem that goes, how you think is how you feel, how you feel is how you act, and how you act, it gives you what you have.
Mhm.
So it's like, yes, it begins with a thought. So thank you for bringing that. Uh, Congratulations on your accomplishment of graduating the Tony Robbins Leadership Academy. That's so impressive.
Thank
how, how would you define a leader that is always inspiring others?
So, leadership for me is about going first. So, imagine that you and a group of friends are in the woods on a dark, moonless night. You don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going until one person who knows the way home shines a light on the path so that everyone can make their way out of the darkness and into the light. And that for me is what leadership is all about. Just as Ram Dass says, we're all walking each other home.
That's beautiful. Yes, that is beautiful. We're all walking each other home. I've never heard that phrase before till you said it. So that is beautiful. And yes, I agree with you. Now, what is your advice for those leaders that are facing unexpected change in their journey at this time?
um, okay, so fun fact, people want growth, but they don't want change. But change is absolutely inevitable. It's going to happen whether you expect it or not. Your hair grows an inch, that's change. You lose 5 pounds, that's change. The only thing we can do as leaders is to tame that inner critic and empower the inner cheerleader so that we can see change as the integral part of growth that it is. Because you cannot have growth without change.
That is beautiful. Here goes back to trying to be safe, like change, since we don't know what it's going to look like, since we don't really know uh, what are the steps, we've never done it before, then yeah, fear takes over us and we're like, I like my comfort zone. I'd just rather be here. You guys go do it, try it out, and then let me know how it goes. So here we go back to our inner critic trying to keep us safe. Because I remember, like being in the workplace and they're like, oh, there is a new system you guys have to follow. And everybody was like, ah, oh, mad, upset. Why is this happening to us? Like, why do we have to change? But once you see others, taking the first step and then, oh, it's not that easy. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not that hard. Once you do it a couple of times, oh, it's not a big deal. But I think it's a natural instinct for us to experience fear when there is a new change.
There's a saying, making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yes. Yeah, and we all seen it through the pandemic because we all experienced, the fear. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know, how we're going to get out of this pandemic. And we all experienced the fear, the stress, and everything else. So it's part of our nature
Yes.
to to experience that fear. But the question is like, well, for how long are you choosing to be there?
For sure.
So, yes. So that is so impressive that you went through this leadership academy already. What was your best experience from it?
Oh, wow. I can honestly say that it allowed me to sharpen the tools in my tool belt so that I could show up in the world as a brighter light.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is beautiful. And here you are shining your light. You know, you're teaching us, you're sharing your knowledge. So that is beautiful. And I bet it built your inner cheerleader as well.
Absolutely, because one of the foundational pieces is that celebration of self. And as I said earlier, we have been brought through a society that we're looking at what we're doing wrong and not looking at what we're doing right. And when I started to switch that focus from wrong to right and just celebrating imperfect perfection, everything changed.
That's beautiful. I'm going through that transition right now, like seeing, that everybody has different filters because they all have different life experiences.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that they're wrong and that it doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that we literally have different life experiences. And through that, then we develop our beliefs and our rules.
So there's a video out there that the main point of the video says that you are the sum of your training. And the reality is that each human is the sum of their training, of their background. There is only one of you in this entire world who has the exact experiences that you have had and the same exact thought processes that you have had. You are the only one that has assigned those meanings to all of your experiences. And in that individuality, we are also part of a large and complex system where there are thousands of other humans who have felt or thought very similar feelings and thoughts as you, even though they are the sum of their own experiences.
That's beautiful. Yes, we are. We are. And sometimes we tend to thought the acceptance or not acceptance of people around us, because we think that, oh, they're right, I'm wrong, they're wrong, I'm right. But in reality, like you just said, that we just have different life experiences, but we're still humans. Oh my goodness. We only have 3 minutes left. I'm sorry. Who's your ideal client and how can we find you?
So, have you ever had those moments where, that inner critic was shouting at you, calling you names, holding you back from everything that you did, telling you about every little mistake you ever made? And why did you think you would ever get to that dream goal? Well, if that's you, I hope help those type of women, the ones who are struggling with that inner critic, to learn to empower the inner cheerleader to create that life of her dreams. And I use my signature GPS for the soul to help those women learn to give themselves grace, to find their life purpose, and learn soul acceptance of themselves. And if you want to know more, you can go to my website, which is www.soulamazing.com, or you can join my free Facebook community. Just search for Empower Your Inner Cheerleader.
Yes, please follow her. She always adds lots of value, wisdom, that you can implement like right away. You can also follow me on my YouTube channel, Paola Guthrie. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Is there a final message, really quick, that you want to share with us, Jodi?
You know, I heard a quote a few years back that really, really impacted me when I started this journey. And it's a quote by Michelangelo. And it says, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set her free. And so I encourage you to keep carving until you set her free. And whatever you do, create yourself a soul amazing life.
Yes, and we're gonna leave you homework. Through the week, analyze how many hours were you letting the inner critic lead you, so that you can begin to develop self-awareness. So that, yeah, keep an eye and say, okay, out of the 15 hours a day that we have awake and going, analyze and see how many of those hours you're allowing your inner critic to lead you, because it's not leading you to happiness and success and accomplishments and growth for sure. Thank you all so much for being here and listening to us. Please this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check it out at spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you so much. Blessings to you all, and we'll see you next Tuesday.